Welcome back to the Dominic Carter Show, Policing in America. We rarely hear the perspective of law enforcement, but we will right now. I am so glad that the police commissioner of Yonkers, New York, is with us, Commissioner John Mueller. Commissioner, thank you for appearing.
Hey, Dominic, how are you?
I'm doing well, Commissioner. You were appointed as the 21st Police Commissioner of the City of Yonkers by Mayor Mike Spano in July of 2019. So you've been on the
Yes,
job for a couple of years. How tough is it to be a police officer these days?
it's tough, but it does depend also, of course, as to where you are. In different places in the country, as we know, you see what's going on in Portland, you see what's going on in Seattle. We're very lucky in Yonkers, New York, to have a real supportive community for the most part. But it's hard. It's hard for these officers out on patrol in general. But we're fortunate in Yonkers for sure.
Commissioner Mueller, why is it hard for police officers these days from your perspective?
I think it's just the general kind of there's kind of a sentiment out there, and I don't think that it's actually accurate for the vast majority of Americans are pro police and they appreciate the work that the police
Mm-hmm.
do,
Mm-hmm.
but it just seems that
Absolutely.
the loudest and the most shrill voices seem to have the most say, and they seem to get the most attention. But when you really look at really how in real neighborhoods, in places where we're working together and we're getting things done in a real positive way, most Americans are very supportive, I think.
We are chatting with the police commissioner of Yonkers, New York, John Mueller. Commissioner, you were born and raised in Yonkers, correct?
I was, yes, sir.
So, this is a broad question. Policing throughout America, do police have to deal with a lot of political interference? I'm not asking necessarily for your department, I'm asking nationwide.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do. I think that especially when if you determine uh, political interference to be some of the laws that have been changed. We've
Hmm.
had a real problem keeping the country safe with some different reforms like bail reform and discovery and some different New York State laws that were enacted. Now, there are aspects of the laws that made sense. But there's other aspects of the law that didn't make any sense to me and really do have a negative effect on public safety. So we've been working really hard with the elected officials in the legislature and the Assembly of New York State to make some minor modifications that we think will help a lot.
Well, Commissioner, in my perspective, there needs to be a lot of modification to get rid of this no cash bail system. But we'll come back to that in just one second. What is the
Okay.
crime situation? Yonkers is what, the fourth largest city in the state of New York? Is that correct? Is somewhere around there?
It is. We are right now the fourth largest. We anticipate, because places like Yonkers are getting bigger, and there are areas upstate that are getting losing population. But right now we're the fourth. Rochester is right just ahead of us with 200,000 and 205,000, and we're 200,000.
And you're, of course, on the border of New York City, very close to New York City, to the Bronx. What's
Yes.
the crime situation in Yonkers? We're seeing basically an explosion in New York City of, if you will, Commissioner, high profile crime incidents. Is crime up, down in Yonkers? What's the status right now?
We're doing okay, Dominic. Thank God. We're holding our own. Our crime numbers are fairly actually they're actually good. We're down as of January 1st. We're down 19% in property crimes, and we're down 5% in violent crimes. So we're holding our own.
Well, that's good news. So let's go back, Commissioner. We are talking to the police commissioner of Yonkers, New York. Let's go back to no cash bail. The state bail reform law eliminates cash bail for most misdemeanor crimes and some felonies. Now, this includes, Commissioner, a litany of crimes. Does
Yes, sir.
no cash bail make the job harder for you and for law enforcement?
Absolutely, and even more importantly than making harder for people in law enforcement is the communities that we serve. And communities of color in particular get hit really hard because if you believe in recidivism, and I do, you're talking about probably only 5% of the population that commits an overwhelming number of crimes, right? So that means like 95% of people are just trying to get through life. So when when you lose the tools to deal with that 5%, you're really getting hit hard. So I'll give you a quick example. So let's take larceny from auto, which we know is a New York thing, but it happens all over the country where someone breaks into your car. They either open up a door that was unlocked or they smash the window. That's let's say I have 4 precincts in Yonkers. Let's say in one particular precinct I have 30 of those a month. It's not 30 different guys taking a turn and doing one each. One guy is doing 20 and the other guy is doing 10 for a total of those 30. So when those guys are in custody and we're able to make good cases against them, there's 0 of those. There's 0 larceny from autos. When they're out of jail, it's through the roof. And that applies to almost every single crime category. So what we're looking for is just assistance for that small group of people that are driving the crime numbers, whether it be shootings, stabbings, breaking into cars, burglaries, whatever it is. There's a very small subset of the population who are committing most of the crimes. And when they're in jail, our crime numbers are fantastic and our community is safe.
We are talking to the police commissioner of Yonkers, New York, John Mueller. And, Commissioner, I saw you on national television recently, and I believe the comment that you just made, it's very interesting, but I believe that's what you refer to as precision policing. Is that accurate?
Very accurate, Dominic. Thank you.
Okay. So explain it a little more, Commissioner, because I've been doing this for close to 40 years, and I never looked at it when it comes to the crime stats that as the great case that you're making, that it's not of course we look at the total sum, but we're looking at the same individuals at the end of the day that are committing the same crimes over and over and over.
Absolutely, and that's kind of the magic of precision policing because you're keeping communities safe. It's basically, Dominic, the best way to explain it is it's an offender-centric approach. So we know, let's say we have our guys doing burglaries that are out there. Like you said, they've done burglaries over and over again. So when they're out of custody, we're paying attention to where they are and what they're doing, and we try to get them back in jail. And when they're out of jail, the burglaries are up. And when they're in jail, burglaries plummet. And it's like that for almost every single crime category, shootings, you name it. So the precision policing model just says take CompStat, where you're seeing where the crimes are, and take it one step further and focus on this group of people that are victimizing the communities the most. And once you lock those guys down, and women sometimes, but it's mostly men, when you lock them down and you make good cases against them, and even if they get 9 months, a year sentence for breaking into cars, that's 9 months that the public doesn't have to deal with that.
Exactly, Commissioner. So you're telling me that one, that you and your officers, the great police officers of Yonkers, New York, you know for the most part who the criminals are, but you're also telling me that this precision policing is a win-win for the community.
Oh, without a doubt. I can show you stats. It's incredible. And that's where bail reform really affected us, where our crime numbers were. And then all of a sudden, we no longer had the authority to keep people. Well, let's not even say we had the authority. Essentially, the legislature took away the power of the judiciary branch, the judges, and didn't give them any option to remand people. And again, we're not even saying that you have to keep everybody in jail. You shouldn't have to. But for those repeat offenders that are rearrested in between arrests, and again, these are the guys that are driving the crime numbers. For people that don't show up to court after they have a court case, same guys. And when you give the judges the power and the latitude to look at those cases and say, this guy is not, this guy is a menace. This guy is a danger to society, and we need to keep him in custody until the case is adjudicated. And when you see that, you really do see the crime numbers drop. It almost works inversely, Dominic. Like when these guys are out of jail, crime is through the roof, and when they're in custody, crime plummets. It's that simple.
It's amazing because I had never looked at the issue, Commissioner, of precision policing. Dominic Carter here with you on Talk Radio 77 WABC. We are talking to the police commissioner of Yonkers, New York, John Mueller. We'll be right back. Dominic Carter, Talk Radio 77 WABC. We have an interesting conversation that we are continuing with the police commissioner of Yonkers, New York, Commissioner John Mueller. Commissioner, let me go back for 1 second to no cash bail. I mean, I get it, Commissioner. Khalif Browder, the young man that committed suicide after he spent 2 years on Rikers. I get it. I understand. He was accused of taking a bag, a school bag, if you will. He said he didn't do it. I understand that changed all of this. And I also get it that when it comes to bail, we are talking about people that have not been convicted of a crime, but basically have been forced to stay behind bars because they could not afford bail. But here's the argument, Commissioner. I don't understand how we just go from trying to better protecting the public to basically telling the criminals you have a get out of jail free card.
Mm-hmm.
So, Commissioner, explain this to me from your point of view, because shouldn't judges have the flexibility to hold someone behind bars when they present a danger to the community?
Absolutely. And, Dominic, you nailed it. Here's the thing. I'm not for cash bail as a police commissioner. I don't think that it's fair that a person who doesn't have any money versus a person who's rich determines who gets out of jail. What I am concerned about for public safety is who is out of jail in between arrests, who has shown a history and a fact pattern of continually offending, hurting people, stealing, reoffending, and reoffending and reoffending. Those are the folks that police are really concerned about. The person like Khalif Browder, who has one arrest under his belt, if that were the case, is not what we're talking about. So there is a way forward for this, and it doesn't have to include money. What it does is you go with what we refer to as a threat matrix. And some other states have it, where you can say, okay, listen, for your first offense, you're not going to be held in jail. Or the judge has a lot more hoops to jump through to make a case as to why you would stay in jail. We're talking about people that have been arrested 30 and 40 and 50 times. We're talking about people that get arrested on Monday. If they get out, they get rearrested on Wednesday. If they get out, they get rearrested on Thursday. And there are people like that. For those folks, I would be a proponent of the judges having much more latitude to say, based on the criminal history or based on the fact that when you do get arrested and you have a court date, you never make the court date. So we have to go find you. So with those two threat matrices, or it's a particularly severe arrest where it's, you've hurt somebody, but people getting arrested for 2 and 3 gun charges, loaded guns, and they get released, and then there's a murder, and everyone wrings their hands and says, how could this have happened? Again, when you go back to the precision policing model, I can tell you how it happened. It happened because we knew that guy was a shooter. He's got a past history of a shooter, and the judge should be given the ability to do what a judge does and look at that criminal history and say, this person is a threat to our community.
Now, you mentioned precision policing just now. We talked about it in the last segment. But from the community standpoint, isn't that something that they support as well?
Oh, man, they love it. And when you sit down and talk, and we're very close with our community in Yonkers, they're fantastic. We really have a great mutual admiration. We work really well together, so that when there are problems, they're right there with us. And yeah, when you lay everything out, and we do this in community meetings, we do this in one-on-one conversations, we get the information out as much as we can in all kinds of different avenues of communication. But when we get it out, I find by and large that people from all walks of life pretty much say, yeah, that makes sense. Like the guy who's been arrested 40 times and he was arrested 6 times last year, I don't know if he's really maintained his right the same way someone who got arrested for the first time in their life. I don't know how we can't differentiate between those two folks based on one with a ridiculous criminal history and the other one with no criminal history. So the community supports it.
Commissioner, and we are talking to the police commissioner of Yonkers, New York, Commissioner John Mueller. Commissioner, we touched on this in the last segment. Let me come back to it again. From a law enforcement point of view, why are tensions so high with some communities?
It depends. And again, we're fortunate in Yonkers. But I think, honestly, Dominic, and this is something that, Al Sharpton, Reverend Sharpton touched on. So I didn't say it, but he has a term called latte liberals. And I think one of the problems is like where you have in Yonkers a community of color, a great, vibrant, hardworking, fantastic community of color like we have, who I absolutely adore. They should be making decisions about how policing occurs, because what I said in that interview, and I'll say it again, just like all politics are local, all policing is local. Someone from Scarsdale or Bronxville or the Hamptons should not be telling my people of color how they should be policed.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that everyone has a right in their own communities to have the biggest voice and the biggest footprint on how we're policing. And I think the tension sometimes rises because, Dominic, you have this national conversation with a group of folks that may not necessarily have real practical experience in the world. I call it a 14,000-foot view, that are kind of casting judgment both on the community, which is insulting to them because they're almost claiming they're not smart enough to understand what they need themselves, which is total BS, and also what the police need to do. That's, there's 18,000 police departments in the United States, and each one is different. So, it's really up to each individual community to decide what's important, how we police, and that's how you build that relationship, and that's how you decrease tension. You don't make things better by listening to people that live, 50,000 miles away and they've never visited a place like Yonkers.
And Commissioner, let the church say amen. I couldn't agree more with everything that you just said. Commissioner, I only have about 2 minutes left here. What is procedural justice?
Procedural justice is fantastic. It's something that I really believe in. It was put forth in the President Obama 21st Century Policing. Charles Ramsey, who is a former commissioner of Philadelphia, to me is one of my heroes in policing. He's a police luminary. Essentially, it's this, Dominic. Treat everyone the way you want your family to be treated. Take the time to explain to people, no matter what, why you're doing what you're doing, so they understand where you're coming from. Allow them to have a voice. Make sure you're coming from a position of fairness, and always practice empathy. So when you do those things, so if it's a traffic stop, it's all about, Dominic, it's about the process more than the result. If one of my police officers curses somebody out, disrespects them in a traffic stop, and then lets them go without writing a ticket, versus the second scenario where they take the time to explain why they were pulling them over, they allow the person to say what they have to say, they explain the dangers of whatever's happening, and they politely issue the ticket. Most of the time, people are less angry about getting a ticket if they were treated properly. So procedural justice is all about the process, not the result. You can treat anybody with respect, and even people that commit crimes need to be treated with respect. There's no reason to disrespect anybody. And when you do that and you treat people on a human level as you would want to be treated yourself, as you would want your family treated, we're in a much better position. That's procedural justice.
But, Commissioner, the other side of that coin, and this is what I try and explain to these young men and young ladies, and I'm of the community, is that the same way you want the police to treat you is how you have to treat them. The respect it runs both ways, correct?
It does, and what we're seeing with the procedural justice piece is we're getting there with it, where just the fact that we're coming off in a proper, respectful, decent, meaningful way and explaining to folks why we're doing what we're doing, we're seeing results in where we are getting what we're giving. So it's kind of a real encouraging thing.
Well, Commissioner, this has been a very enlightening conversation for me talking to you. We are talking to the Police Commissioner of Yonkers, New York, Commissioner John Mueller, and we wish you much success with your tenure as the commissioner. And the reason why I say that is because, Commissioner, if you succeed, then the community succeeds. So we thank you very much.
Amen, brother. I couldn't say it better myself. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Commissioner.